this time we're going to welcome both Rudd Turnbull and Deborah Splatonic, who have had an extraordinary historical role in the development of IDEA. Their contributions, many of you in this room know that we owe them a great gratitude for their contributions to where we are now with the law, and they're going to share some history with us. And then Lewis will be back to talk about the youth panel. So, Rudd.
I think I need to throw away about 50% of what I was going to say, because it has been said. Nonetheless, in 1971, John Lennon encouraged us to imagine all the people sharing all the world. So, let us imagine. The year is 1974. Imagine being the parents of a first-grade boy with intellectual disability. Imagine watching as the school bus comes to pick up all the neighborhood children, but it does not stop to pick up your son. That boy was our son, Jay Turnbull. And just as there had been no early intervention programs for him, so too the doors for the schools were closed for him and for many with disabilities. That changed in 1975 when Congress enacted 94-142. Jay and all students with disabilities now had the right to an education because research had shown that all can learn. Now imagine teenagers in segregated high schools, bound for sheltered workshops where they would be paid less than $1 an hour. Imagine parents not having federally funded parent information and training centers and no community parent resource centers in underserved communities. The years, 1983 through 1987. The IDEA remedies, an opportunity for early intervention for preschool students, a right to inclusion for the student with a teenager, transition to competitive employment, and a right for a real voice for all parents. The consequence? Real rights, real opportunities to live the American promise, and parent-professional partnerships in pursuit of the American dream. The year is now 1988. Our son Jay earns a regular high school diploma up the road here at Walt Whitman High School. He has been a manager of the football team. He receives his varsity letter jacket at a season-ending football banquet, and players and their families stand to applaud him vigorously. He has learned skills sufficient to do a job as a research aide at a major research university. And for just over 20 years, he is in the American workforce, paid a competitive wage, paying the wages of the federal employees here, including Secretary Duncan. And he lives with support in his home, his own home, and he lived there with a life of dignity until he died quite unexpectedly in 2009. Now, imagine students being disciplined by seclusion and restraint and noxious sprays and electric shock, being expelled because of their disabilities and having few rights to resist discipline of any kind, much less this demeaning discipline. The year is 1997. The IDEA remedy, a right to have educators consider positive behavior support to respond to students' needs. The consequence? the infusion of federally funded research into how schools can use those supports to create a humane environment for education, a place that incorporates both rights and decency. And finally, imagine the students in schools that have low expectations for them. The first half-decade of this century. And one IDEA remedy is independent living. And that remedy is achieved by a powerful evidence-based curriculum on self-determination and supports, guiding students to be autonomous people, and the consequence, independent students who know how to make their own decisions. Despite what I've asked you to do, we have not been imagining. No, we have been remembering. Our memories capture IDEA's fundamental message. First, disability is a natural consequence of the human condition and is no reason for discrimination. And second, discrimination in our schools will fade as appropriate education in inclusive schools occur. Our job here is to preserve and improve that law, and we must constantly be on guard that Congress does not dilute it. To be expected to benefit in school because of your rights, that is what ID has meant before now. To be welcomed and to be dignified in school, that is what IDEA must mean in the future. To achieve that result, we must overcome two challenges. The first is to provide an education for the students that makes it likely, not probable, but likely, that they, across their lifespans, will attain IDEA's 4 goals: equal opportunity, independent living, full participation, and economic self-sufficiency. We are a long way from attaining those goals, and the consequence is simply unacceptable. Because failing to achieve these 4 goals for all students with disabilities, then few people with disabilities will find themselves to be welcomed or dignified in their communities. We must do better in our schools so that our communities will be better places for all of us. Our second challenge is to ensure that our schools are the foundation for more than rights and education. They must become the places where a new culture is birthed, raised, and matured. And this new culture perhaps is best known as the ethical community. This new culture and these new communities acknowledge the capabilities of people with disabilities. It honors their lives to be self-determined. The new IDEA will not simply say that disability is a natural consequence of the human condition and therefore expected presence in our communities. No, the new IDEA must proclaim that those with disabilities are welcome and will be treated with dignity in every one of our communities. IDEA should forever memorialize a foundational American creed, which is simply this: our differences, whether based on race, ethnicity, cultural heritage, sexuality, age, and disability, yes, especially disability, should not separate us from each other, should not segregate us from each other. Each of us is less able than someone else in one way or the other. All of us have different lineages, different abilities, and different limitations. But none of us is therefore less worthy. Each of us who has a disability, must be welcomed and dignified. And that was the implicit message when Congress enacted IDEA in 1975. It must be the explicit message when Congress reenacts it next year. John Lennon challenged us to imagine all the people sharing all the world. Almost a decade before John Lennon wrote those words, John Kennedy, himself the brother of a woman with intellectual disability, said this: "I believe in human dignity as the source of our national purpose, in human liberty as the source of our national action, in the human heart as the source of our national compassion, and in the human mind as the source of our invention and ideas." It has been a pleasure to celebrate IDEA's 40th anniversary with you. You who have acknowledged human dignity as the source of our national purpose. You who know that liberty is the source of our national action. You who will continue to use your hearts to be the source of national compassion, and you whose minds and imaginations will be the source for a new and improved IDEA. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm so honored to be here with all of you. And I want to talk about bending the arc towards justice, IDEA, and the common good. As someone who taught kindergarten in impoverished Boston public schools, at a time when it took 5 years to get a 5-year-old with significant developmental delays even tested, it is not only an honor, but also deeply redemptive to be here celebrating the 40th anniversary of IDEA and the progress we've made as a nation. From the heartbreaking history of children confined to institutions, and with all but children with mild disabilities barred from the doors of our schools, it has been IDEA, along with Children's SSI, that has made it possible for families to raise children at home. IDEA is the major hedge against the injunctions of the past, when physicians typically told families when their child was born, "Don't take him home, it will ruin your family. Don't see her, don't hold her, just place her and go home and get pregnant again." Now, when a child with a disability is born, through IDEA, our nation expresses to families, "We value your child and your family. We will embrace your family through early intervention. We will educate your child from preschool forward. And we say to you, emerging adults, we will support your transition to a life of opportunity, meaning, and contribution." While IDEA has bent the arc towards justice for generations of children and their families, this justice is not universally distributed. We know that educational outcomes of children with disabilities living in poverty are poorer than for more advantaged families. We know that disproportionality in eligibility, in placement, and in disciplinary actions persists for minority children and children with limited English proficiency. The common good is not served by suspending or expelling preschool children. To hold ourselves accountable to our children and to our nation's future, we must ensure that the information that we collect through ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the information about discipline, as well as proficiency and achievement, be disaggregated by race, ethnicity, disability, and gender. We must also honor many of the opportunities inherent but under-resourced in Part D of IDEA to address these disparities. IDEA makes manifest the imperative for the federal government to ensure opportunity for children wherever they live. IDEA reminds us that we belong to each other, that the common good is enhanced when we have not only the opportunity, but the support to be included, to be present with each other, to have the resources to communicate with each other, and to learn together. In the early 1970s, when Gunnar Dybwad counseled the parents of the then Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children that it was time to resort to the courts, and Tom Gilhool litigated what became the part consent, in our wildest dreams, we could not have imagined the changes that have occurred. Achieved through assertive advocacy and bolstered by empirical findings, access to the general curriculum, now the norm, represents a quantum leap from how access was first conceived of in 94-142. As we recognize that the aspirations of all students are similar, opportunities and support are not yet comparable. We need to further develop and apply the body of instruction and support that makes college and career accessible for students with significant disabilities. Many families feel that when we speak of access to the general curriculum, aligned with state standards by grade levels and alternative assessments that measure grade level, that this does not yet have resonance and relevance for their daughters and sons with significant disabilities. If families feel left out, if they do not see their children supported in learning, it is harder for them to develop or embrace the high expectations which are the most predictive of employment as an outcome for students with disabilities. As Rudd said, too many children receive their education in places that are separate from their brothers and sisters, from their neighbors and peers with disabilities. To make inclusion real, we need not only highly qualified special ed teachers, but we need to ensure that all teachers receive meaningful preparation in universal design, differentiated instruction, and tiered intervention. Teacher preparation and certification, as Secretary Duncan said, must be moving to joint certification for general ed and special ed for inclusive schools to become a reality for all children. Part D of IDEA recognizes the importance of personnel preparation to educate new teachers and the necessity of professional development to enhance the skills of cohorts of teachers, paraprofessionals, clinicians, and related services personnel. We must ensure that resources are dedicated to the skills and the development of the human beings that are at the heart of our most human enterprise, education. Despite IDEA's presumption toward the least restrictive environment, the majority of students with intellectual disabilities and students with severe disabilities do not yet spend most of the day with their peers. We have not sufficiently bent the arc towards justice in making available the opportunities for learning and relationships that contribute to future employment and the richness of lifetime connection and relationship. I want to raise up the importance and meaning of school-wide interventions, including positive behavior supports in this context. Beyond the empirical impact of these interventions, school-wide interventions serve as a preview for an inclusive society. It is in school where we learn how to exercise our individual responsibilities as a member of a group, to listen and to work with each other, to support each other. We learn that everyone's success, and our success as a whole, creates the common good. We have strong empirical data that inclusion benefits children with disabilities. We are also learning that inclusion benefits all students, that it is a contribution to the common good. We are indebted to the work of Eric Carter, who has demonstrated that peers who play an active role in providing support in inclusive classrooms do better academically as a result of learning alongside their peers. By being present and engaged with each other, students learn about diversity and disability in the most personal of terms. Relationships develop and attitudes change. Students with disabilities are then in relationship to their future employers and employees. Another testament to why transition, including community-based instruction and other experiences, need to happen in one's home community. I now ask the medical students I teach whether they've gone to school with students with disabilities. With each generation of students, more hands go up. We can take great heart knowing that IDEA has made it possible for these future physicians to see their future patients not as other, defined by diagnosis and labels, but as friends, as neighbors and peers. The purpose of IDEA, of all education, is to make it possible for young people to flourish in adult life. As we celebrate the increasing numbers of students in special education who are graduating high school with their peers, a milestone in all our lives, we must ensure that there continues to be the full flowering and implementation of the transition entitlement, making it possible for students to access post-secondary education and employment, to have a truly meaningful transition to adult life. The braiding together of IDEA with ESEA enhances the circumstances for opportunity and achievement, but also creates policy complexities that we must help states and schools thread their way through. Around the country, there is shared concern about students who complete their education but are not achieving post-school outcomes, not accessing higher education, not working or meaningfully engaged or receiving adequate services and supports. There were proposals to create new transition structures to address this, legislative proposals, to address this cliff students and families experience as they move from education and entitlement to systems based on eligibility. We must proceed vigorously but carefully to address the needs of the growing cohort of students, the IDEA generation, who have or who are finishing their education. We must apply the resources necessary to strengthen the transition purpose and processes of IDEA, while also advocating for invigorating adult service systems and opportunities, braiding together the opportunities inherent in the Workforce Opportunity and Investment Act and in home and community-based services. The centrality of families in their child's education is the heart of IDEA. To honor all families, we need to ensure that the parent information and education elements of Part D reach families in ways that are responsive to their language, their culture, and life circumstances. With early intervention now provided in natural environments, we must be intentional about assuring that parent-to-parent support is there for all families as they begin their family's life trajectory living with disability. As we celebrate and affirm the right to education, we are also challenged to develop and support new ways for parents and schools to work collaboratively to resolve differences and disagreements. As schools, can we listen to parents in their knowledge and hope for their beloved child? As families, can we appreciate both the good intentions and the pressures upon schools? Can we approach each other with the empathy of Lincoln, that they are just what we would be in their situation? They are just what we would be in their situation. IDEA is structured upon civil rights, the right to exercise procedural safeguards and due process protections, the right to resort to the courts. These protections can never be abrogated, yet we also know that often after prevailing in these processes, in court, the relationship between the school and the family may have become so frayed and adversarial that it becomes difficult to create the common ground conducive to achievement, security, and shared purpose for the student. Can we affirm rights as the underpinning for each student, as well as our advocacy writ large, keeping in the forefront of our minds and actions the observation of William Penn? We are too ready to retaliate rather than forgive in love and information. Today, we celebrate IDEA and the lives that have been changed by the right to education. With love and information, we can together go forward and serve the common good and ensure the future of our nation by educating all of our children so that lives are filled with hope and connection, productivity, and joyous spirits. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Turnbull and Dr. Spitanik, for your continued commitment to students with disabilities and their families. Now we have an opportunity to welcome a few students, parents, and teachers to learn more about how the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act has specifically impacted their lives. The two panels are each comprised of a youth, parent, and teacher. Our first panel includes Noah Kane, a freshman at Rock Ridge High School in Loudoun County, Virginia. His mother, Kristen Kane, and a former teacher, William Gulgert, who is currently an assistant principal at Stonehill Middle School. Our second panel includes Madison Essig, and a senior at Woodrow Wilson High School, here in the District of Columbia. Her mother, Kimberly Templeton, and her teacher, Eden McCaulson, who teaches English and Social Studies at Woodrow Wilson High School. Let's welcome our first panel.
Good morning. Happy birthday, IDEA. I would like to start with thank you for the opportunity as a parent to speak today. My son Noah and I are proud to be part of such a historical event. And to be able to bring such a special educator with us today, Mr. Bill Gogert from Loudoun County Public School, really makes our team complete. I was nominated by our team to start today, and I thought, well, I guess that would be okay, because sometimes as parents, we are the initiators in this process. What I thought I would do is begin with a short story so that you may have an opportunity to get a small glimpse of Noah and this journey through the eyes of his mom. Now, what you might notice about this story is that IDEA, today's guest of honor, does not make an appearance until close to the end. And that's because so many families, we did not realize we had landed at the doorstep of IDEA until we were knocking on the door. You see, with an invisible disability like learning disabilities, our family was unaware Noah needed services until he began to struggle in the classroom. Noah attended preschool and entered kindergarten with all the other 5-year-olds from our neighborhood. And on the first day, Noah met his teacher. She asked him what he would like to learn in kindergarten. He quickly responded, "I want to learn to read like my big sister Hannah." That sounded like a great plan to me. And as a proud mom, I thought pretty insightful for a 5-year-old. Well, it just did not happen. The letters and sounds did not become automatic for him like his peers, but he soaked up his environment and he traveled on to first grade. We mentioned and discussed with his teachers things seemed a bit off. His friends know their ABCs, they're sounding out words, and they're beginning to read books. Hang on, Mrs. Kane. He's so bright. Keep reading together at home. It's all going to come together. We arrived at second grade, ready for that click, the one that was going to happen any minute. And in October of that year, we received a call from his second grade teacher. She asked us to sit down and let us know Noah was reading below a kindergarten level. She thought it was time we begin the referral process for special education. We had now arrived at the threshold of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The process seemed harried and sometimes painfully slow. The discussion size increased from parent and teacher to a conference room full of professionals. It was scary and comforting all at once. And when our rights and responsibilities were slid across the table, I knew we had entered into new territory. Over the years to come, we learned so much, not only about dyslexia and dysgraphia, but about IDEA and how the law serves to protect Noah and his education in the public school classroom. We educated ourselves through resources like the NCLD and the Virginia State PTI. We learned about things like measurable goals, accommodations, accessibility to the curriculum, and we realized the importance and huge impact the administrators and teachers of a school have in creating an environment of high expectations and acceptance throughout the building. And finally, we embraced our roles as engaged parents on the IEP team. And when Noah was ready, he joined that team, because who better to hear from than the child, the I in the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And with that, I would like to turn the floor to Noah.
Thank you, Mom, and thank you all for allowing me to be here. Since I am here to speak about my story, I'd like to start from the beginning. One constant in my life is my love for science. My mom sometimes teases that I understood gravity on different planets before I understood my ABCs. And instead of spending time watching Sesame Street, I spent time watching the Science Channel. I think the first instance I can remember dyslexia impacting my education was in second grade. Whenever we would read aloud, I would count the number of students before me so I could find my paragraph. I would do this to give myself extra time to try to match the words being read by my peers to the words I could find or match in my paragraph. The hope was to figure out the words before it was my turn. It actually only worked 2 or 3 times, but it was worth the attempt since I couldn't read. Even to this day, I will be listening to a book in class, or I will ask someone to read directions to me, and they will look at me as if it's wrong or I'm just being lazy. This is a small amount of my life. I'm sure there are people in the audience that know the struggle of being dyslexic or dysgraphic, but my life is not just a struggle. There are plenty of happy and good moments, like the first time I finished a chapter book. I was in the 3rd grade, and my mom had gotten me access to audiobooks on Learning Ally. The book was Hank Zipser, co-authored by Henry Winkler and Lynn Oliver, who I was lucky enough to meet this past September at the National Book Festival right here in D.C. You see, the main character in the Hank Zipser books has a learning disability, just like me and Henry Winkler. Finishing that audiobook was a big deal. It wasn't just finishing a book, it was a trophy to me. I'm still not a big eye reader, but I am an avid ear reader. What I learned from that book was that I love stories. It was the reading that got in the way. But accommodations can help. Now let's talk about accommodations. Accommodations are very important to me. They help level the playing field in test taking and classroom assignments. Accommodations let me show my knowledge on the content of a subject without my reading and writing disabilities getting in the way. For example, having a small group to take tests in helps me focus on the questions being asked, and having someone read the questions aloud secures I understand the questions being asked. As I move through my grades, self-advocacy is becoming more and more prominent. I'm confident to speak up for myself to my teachers, and I know that as an adult, I will need to do the same for myself. whether I'm a college student or own my own business or discovering new theories of physics. Now, as a freshman in high school, I remain loyal to my passion as a child and am most interested and motivated in my science classes. I want to go to college with a strong science department and double major in theoretical physics and astrophysics, and become an astrophysicist that comes up with theories of space, like Stephen Hawking's. Disability or not, I hope to change the world someday, and I know that I can with people like my parents and Mr. Golgert on my side.
What a spectacular self-advocate Noah has become. He definitely understands his needs, and he's able now to voice them effectively to others who need to know. We're lucky because we're surrounded by parents and educators who not only understand IDEA, but use that as a framework of best practices in working with all students. When Noah first transitioned to sixth grade, I remember it like it was yesterday, because he was polite and respectful and said hi every day in the hallway. And you wouldn't know from interacting that he struggled with anything, because he hid it well. But he definitely knew that there was an issue. The difference is he didn't have a voice at that time. So within that transition, it was important for us to get Mr. and Mrs. Kane and Noah involved into the IEP process, because we all need to be decision makers, and no one person knows everything. So as a team, we were able to effectively identify what Noah needed year after year, or month after month, depending on when it was. So building those relationships, from our perspective, was the baseline for creating a spectacular team where we had guidelines that everybody had input, and we listened to one another through the meetings and outside of the meetings. And we incorporated Noah into the input early on. I think that teamwork and that ability to listen and incorporate a young adolescent is what got us to where we are today with Noah, definitely with the help of both Mr. and Mrs. Kane. So today, Noah has overcome many hurdles, and it's never been with a complaint or placing of blame, but instead a young man who sets goals and achieves goals, and then repeats the process by setting new, more rigorous goals. We could not be more proud of Noah and the young man he's become. He's an inspiration to many of us, and to be honest with you, there are things that I've learned from working with the family and working with Noah that I bring into my own house. So we'd like to thank you for listening to Noah's story and for letting us play a role in the 40th anniversary of IDEA.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Templeton, and I'm honored to be here today with my daughter, Madison, and one of her teachers, Ms. Eden McCausland. Thank you to Mr. Rodriguez and the White House, and to Secretary Duncan and the Department of Education for inviting us to share Madison's story. Madison, would you like to begin?
Yes. My name is Madison Essig. I am 19 years old, and I was born with Down syndrome. When I was little, I received early intervention services. I also used sign language to communicate before I was able to talk. I have been included in regular classes since I started kindergarten. I am now a senior at Woodrow Wilson High School here in Washington. I have a 3.7 GPA and was inducted in the Wilson chapter of the National Honor Society last month. I am involved in a lot of activities at Wilson, including serving as a Buddy Ambassador for the Wilson chapter of the Best Buddies Club, singing in the Wilson Choir, and a member of the Yoga Club. I am going to be the first person with Down syndrome to graduate with a standard diploma from Wilson this June.
What are some of the things that have helped you to be so successful?
I have been included in regular classes with my friends. I have had an aide to provide support in my academic classes, such as taking notes for me and helping me to organize my research papers. I also have had accommodations like extended time for tests and classwork, and taking some of my tests in the room where I can read the question out loud. Some of my best classes have been inclusion classes, where there have been 2 teachers.
What are some of the things that have been difficult or challenging for you?
I have worked hard to be successful in school, which sometimes has not been easy. I have had to advocate for myself to make sure my teachers know what my accommodations are. I also have had to go to my teachers for extra help. I have had to be very organized and make sure I know when my deadlines are and put extra time into studying for exams. Also, even though most of my teachers have been supportive of me, there have been some who have not known how to teach someone with Down syndrome.
Graduating from high school is a big accomplishment. What is next for you, and what are some of your goals for the future?
I would like to go to college. I took the SAT last month, and I am interning at the National Down Syndrome Society to get work experience. I know that I need both academic and living support in college, so I am looking at schools that provide both types of services. I also want to be in a sorority. I think that I would like to have a job working with children or in healthcare. I also would like to live on my own and have a good social life.
As I listen to Madison, I'm reminded of the day she was born and we received the diagnosis that she had Down syndrome. It was a very emotional day. We were told that Madison would walk, but her doctors couldn't tell us if she would read or if she would write. It was clear that their expectations for her were extremely low. I had to regroup. I had to learn how to be a parent to someone with special needs. I learned about IDEA and the rights it afforded Madison, and I determined to give her every opportunity to reach her full potential. I also determined not to let the label Down syndrome define her. I vowed not to let others' low expectations limit her. Early intervention, which Madison began months after she was born, provided her with a strong foundation that reduced her need for services later on. I asked, negotiated, and sometimes fought to have her included in regular classes beginning in elementary school, and worked closely with her teachers and special ed administrators to ensure that she had the services she needed to be successful. I believe then, and after what I've learned in the last 14 years advocating for Madison, believe even more strongly now that all students, those with disabilities and those without, should be educated together in inclusive environments that foster interaction, increased expectations, and respect for diversity. I attribute Madison's success to both her own abilities and the teachers she has had over the years. Madison is very self-motivated, determined, resilient, and works harder than any other person I know. She also has great self-esteem stemming from the positive situation she has been exposed to, precisely because her classmates see her as just another one of them. Madison has also had some wonderful teachers who have been willing and able to make things work. Ms. McLaughlin is one of those teachers who rose to the challenge immediately to assure that Madison would have the opportunity to be a fully integrated member of her class.
Thank you. I'm a general education teacher at Woodrow Wilson Senior High School. I have personal experience with individuals with Down syndrome, as my much older cousin, Frances, has Downs. She was born before IDEA became law and was unable to attend any formal schooling. Because of this, Frances is totally dependent on her sisters for the rest of her life. Having Madison in my United States history class was a pleasure. Madison brought great energy to the class and encouraged her classmates to work hard. Even though I received Madison's IEP at the beginning of the school year, I knew that piece of paper could not tell me everything about her. I made it a point to sit down with Madison and ask her what she needed from me and her classmates in order to be successful in my class. The important part to remember is that this is all individualized. What works for one student might not work for another, and that is okay. As long as every student gets to the same destination by the end of the year, it does not matter how many pit stops they make or if they want to take a little bit longer looking at the fall foliage. It's wonderful to see how successful Madison has been and will continue to be with the support of her family and teachers. It is amazing how far the educational system has come from the time of my cousin Frances, who was essentially forbidden from walking through her sister's school front doors, to see Madison walking across this stage this coming June. I can only hope that Madison's story will continue the conversation about the quality and access of special education in our public schools and ensure that no student with disabilities is left behind. She's an inspiration to all students, and it was an honor to teach her.
Thank you. Madison, you clearly had a great experience in Ms. McLaughlin's class. What are some of the things you really liked or that worked for you?
I liked that her class was interactive and we had a lot of group work. I also liked the fact we had projects in addition to tests and papers. I also liked working with friends so we could teach each other and ask each other questions. It made me happy when other students were impressed with how much I knew. Also, Ms. McLaughlin was supportive of me and patient and understanding when something was hard or I needed more time.
Ms. McLaughlin, looking back, is there anything that you could have done differently or anything that you could have done to make Madison's experience in your class even better?
Sure. Looking back, I wish I had spoke with Madison within the first week of school. I sat back and observed her interactions in class and did not have a conversation with her until about a month into the school year. I believe that if I spoke with Madison immediately, I might have been able to push her a little bit harder in my class. This allows me to build a rapport with my student and also become another advocate in the building for her, making sure that Madison has all of the tools in order to be successful.
As Madison alluded to earlier, IDEA has not only enabled her to achieve academic success, but it has also provided the opportunity for Madison to become a full social member of the Wilson community. She is involved in a variety of school activities, and I'm amazed at how many students she knows and how many friends she has. She is hugged and high-fived in the halls, goes to every school dance, and like every other teenager, spends far too much time texting and talking to her friends on Facebook. If Madison had been limited to contained special education classes, she likely would never know, let alone interact with, most of Wilson's students. And equally important, they would not know or interact with her. I know from many of their parents that they have talked about getting to know Madison and how she has significantly and positively changed their perceptions of individuals with Down syndrome. Being included in regular classes also has prepared Madison for the future. She has learned to deal with the wide spectrum of people and personalities that make up the Wilson community and how to navigate in the real world by advocating for herself. I'm seeing this now as she looks at college and knows the questions she needs to ask to make sure she can access the support and services she needs. Madison, do you have any additional thoughts about transition and how prepared you are to take the next step to college?
I am having to look hard to find colleges that I can apply to, as not a lot of schools provide the support services I need. Some do provide academic support, but very few provide support to help me navigate the challenges of living away from home for the first time as a college student. I don't want to be limited to a college program just for people with disabilities.
I am looking forward to Madison's transition to her own independent life and excited to help her find a college that meets her needs and fulfills her dreams. It would be wonderful to see even more higher ed institutions in the future offering comprehensive support as greater numbers of students with disabilities seek post-secondary education opportunities. As her mother, I am so proud to know that Madison is going to go on to do great things. Of course, she will face further challenges as someone with Down syndrome, but I am certain that the education she has received as guaranteed by IDEA has provided her with a strong foundation to achieve continued success and find meaningful competitive employment. IDEA has forged a new frontier from the time Ms. McLaughlin's cousin Frances was denied the right to an education to today in Madison's story. Its underlying belief that all students are entitled to an appropriate education that prepares them for the future undeniably changed Madison's outcome, as it is changing the future for so many other students who are being provided the opportunity to reach their full potential. The law's mandate for education in the least restrictive environment not only enabled Madison to read, and to write, which we were told 19 years ago was unlikely, but to graduate with a 3.7 GPA. I am well aware that not all students with disabilities will achieve the same academic success. What is important is that each and every one has the opportunity to reach their own individual potential. Simply put, we would not be here today if not for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. You can say it.
Yeah, anyways. Thank you again for the opportunity to tell my story.